So the purpose of this video is to teach you how to use draw.io, which is an online drawing solution, which you might be required to use for your test tomorrow. So you will, for your test, you might be asked to draw a picture or diagram, for example, of the V model, right? Maybe I'll ask you to do that. You will use draw.io. And in terms of how you get me the link, you will save the image you make as a PNG file, and I will give you in the test question a Dropbox location to upload that file to. So guys, follow along with me, please. I think that would be a good idea. So go to your web browser, and it's probably best to use Chrome because it's a Microsoft, it's a Google product. It probably works best with your own browser. So draw.io, there we go. And so we'll say create new diagram on my device. And there's lots of cool stuff here. There's templates for UML, for SQL tables, for software, for network. But in my opinion, the best way is just start with a blank diagram. That's the cleanest and simplest. And then store it somewhere which you're going to remember because you need to upload it at the end, right? So I have something called the data directory where I store all my stuff in so I can find it later. So make sure you remember where you stored it. And then name your diagram as your student name and student ID. It's always good to do that because when everybody uploads, right, I have to know whose work belongs to who. And store it as a PNG. That's a good image file you can use. Save. Now you see you have some drawing tools over here. So it's probably not a bad idea to label your work again with your student name and student ID to just make sure I know about it. I know who you are, right, for marking. And you could say test, you could say the course code, MAD. Where are we? 5234, I think. Test 1, you put the date. And mostly I want to get you familiar with using draw.io because it's a very cool tool and you can use it in your other courses besides this one, and you will be using it to draw UML diagrams in your capstone project course. So what's tomorrow's date? The 19th, I think. 19th, no, 20th. Today's the 19th. So then you would just go and draw your V diagram, right? So maybe you want to spend a few minutes before class tomorrow or tonight or something. You can just practice that. And see, I just used Control-C and Control-V to copy-paste. And then you could put labels, right? So you could put what's going on over here in the software development lifecycle. Oh, you see there, that text box got attached to that line. Well, that happens. so that if I move things around, they'll stick with each other. Anyway, since that's already attached, I'll say this is my software test lifecycle. And just the act of making diagrams like this is good studying, right? Because you're actively processing the information and you're sort of bringing it into your brain and you're pushing it around. And if you're a tactile visual learner, which I am, that's my preferred learning style, it's a very powerful way for me to learn things. So because I erased my legend identifying myself, I'll retype that down here. And anyway, then you would just go and do all that other stuff that's from the diagram. So just put in everything you can think about to put in. So what do we do in software testing lifecycle? Well, we always start at the inception phase. So we consider our idea or what our client wants us to do. So that's the ideation phase. Sometimes it's called in some books, they use the term ideation, meaning you're coming up with the idea. So that's the first step in your software development lifecycle. And then what does that map to over here, right? What's the end? So the beginning of software testing lifecycle is inception, and the end, the beginning of the development is inception, and the end is what? Somebody jump into the chat box there and help me out. I can't remember right now. So what's the end of the, oh, you're not hearing my voice? Audio level test. Audio level test. Can you hear me? Audio level test. Yeah, user acceptance, exactly. Amandeep, can you hear me? Yeah, it's recording anyway. So you're going to have this Camtasia video as well as the class video. So if you didn't hear something, just watch the Camtasia video. Exactly, it's user acceptance testing. It's user acceptance testing. So anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm just showing you how the tool works. And then we said that those two mate up with each other, right? Those two connect to each other. And then you go all the way down. So the end, or the lowest level of software testing, is what? The simplest, the kind of bottom of the pile here in the software testing life cycle. I mean, you could say it's kind of the first thing you do, or it's the last thing you do. If you start from the inception phase and you work your way down the product development phase, yeah, that's JUnit. Doesn't have to be JUnit. There's other frameworks, but it would be some kind of method unit testing. That's right. So here you would have your JUnit method testing. And in terms of our So if this over here, if unit testing is kind of the end, sorry, unit testing should be over here. So that's the beginning of software testing, right? So we go down from inception, and then we go all the way down, and we start our testing here. So what is the other end here? What am I going to put right here? So see over here on the right side is my software test lifecycle, and it starts with JUnit and it ends with user acceptance. And my software development lifecycle starts with the inception phase. What is the end, right? If the inception phase, the ideation phase is the beginning, what's the very end? Well, what do I put where the question marks are? Somebody jump into there in the chat box and tell me that. So what do I put where the question marks are? Right? Because the V unit, the way it works, is one side is software development, the other side is software testing. Software development goes from top to bottom. Software testing goes from bottom to top. The top of development is inception, and the end of testing is unit testing. The end of development, by the time we've done everything else, we're writing methods, we have JUnit. So what's the corresponding thing in the testing? Code, exactly. And again, you can always go back here and double check this as well. But because this is a relatively new topic, we just introduced it yesterday, I just want to lock it in. So it's programming, right? So we get our requirements, we architect, we design, and then we do programming. And then programming, well, that starts with unit testing. And so anyway, that's programming. That's right there. Right, so we start here. And we gather our requirements. So we make sure and we validate. So ideation, we state our requirements. And then once we have an idea of the requirements, we architect and design the software. So I just did Control-C and Control-V to just duplicate that. And then we write the software. We actually start writing the programming. So we architect the application. By the way, this diagram right here, I did this diagram. I made this diagram. What is my meeting? Whenever I don't see my meeting, I get nervous that oh no, I thought I lost the meeting. Yeah, I actually made this diagram using draw.io, so it's quite a powerful and quite a nice tool. Now, in terms of unified process and agile, what is the tool that we use to architect? So what's the tool that we use to develop our architecture? What is the methodology? What's the thing? Use cases. So the architecture is done with use cases. And the design is done with UML diagrams. And programming is done with Java, with Eclipse, whatever is your tool set. And periodically you should save, right? Do file save, because if your computer locks up or something, you don't want to lose too much of your work. Now, as you go from JUnit testing up to user acceptance testing, what are some of the little things you're going to pass along your way? Well, at some point we have integration testing, which means all of our classes are working together. Right? So we're going to design classes and integrate them together. And then we have system testing, that tests with our externalities. Our database, web server, whatever is outside of our code. So system testing. Check that our code is working with our externalities. And that can also contain the concept of environmental testing. Sometimes you see environmental testing split out as a separate factor. I personally don't believe it should be, because environment testing deals with things like the conditions it'll be used, so conditions of use. So that could be anything from the educational level of our user. It could be heat, humidity, moisture. Maybe we're going to bring it to the desert to, I don't know, try to search for oil or water or something. So dust, vibrations, right? Maybe you're going to put the computer in a truck and drive it around a lot. So make sure it's actually going to stand up to the conditions of use and that the people who are going to be using it are able to use it. And that might overflow with user acceptance testing, right? So a lot of these things are sort of they're sort of a judgment call. And I don't really care that much exactly where you put each of these things, but I would like to see that you're aware you have a sensibility of all of these. So once again, we state our requirements, or we figure out from our users, and then somebody mentioned before that was a good thing. Let's go and capture it here. Over here, we do validation tests, even if it's just thinking. We think, is it actually possible? Is the data that's needed to make this thing work, is it actually available to us? I remember once when I was at IBM, well, it happened many times, but one time I'm thinking about, I was working with a marketing team, and the lady who was in charge of this team, she wanted to send out a paper flyer, and she wanted the web analytics to report on whoever read that paper. I told her, well, a couple of things. Number one, if it's paper, we don't really have a way to keep track of it. And even if we can see who looked at it, that doesn't mean we can pay attention to actually read it. And she got quite upset. She thought I was being lazy, and I didn't want to do the work. She said she's going to complain to our manager. I said, complain to whoever you want. There is no web technology that lets you keep track of what's going on with a piece of paper. I think because she'd been at some seminar or something, she sort of got the idea that you can track who clicks on a web page, which you can through cookies or pixels or different ways. But anyway, before you spend a bunch of time and money, make sure that what you want to do is actually possible to do. And then the other side of this, the guy who mates up with this, that we call validation testing. Verification testing. So we make sure, and we can also have the concept of use case testing here. So use case testing is generally somewhere further up the stack. Use cases deal with intentionality. So you might get a question on use case testing. That just means that all of the requirements specified in our use cases are delivered. And that would probably be up at the user acceptance testing level. Most of the time it's done that way. And what else could I think of to tell you here? So down here at the bottom, we're actually designing. The first thing we do when we start programming is we write classes, right? I'm assuming we're in Java. It's other languages, it might be slightly different, but let's just stick with Java to keep it simple. So we write our classes, and that we test that our methods in our classes are working correctly with unit testing. And then we check that the classes are, the two different classes are communicating together properly. So method, that's class interaction, that's integration testing. And up here we get system testing. And user acceptance testing, and there's also use case testing, which depending where you want to park it, I'd probably put it up there. So I would say this is most of what we'd be concerned about. So when you're finally finished this, you're going to say save, and you're going to find wherever you saved it, and I'll give you a Dropbox link to upload it.